I like it.
We went to a Dust Devils game one time, and I think it went into extra innings.
Oh,
And she goes, you know what they need to do is when it goes into extra innings, for every inning they play, they need to take like 2 players off the field. make it go quicker.
or
Right.
add baby goats to the field.
Well, what they did
Yeah.
is, and I don't know if they did by then, but in overtime, they put a runner at second base. And Major League Baseball started that this year. So as soon as it gets to overtime, they will put a runner at second base.
Really?
Yep.
Right at the start of
And right at the start of the 10th inning.
I hadn't heard that.
No, I haven't. What's with that?
Well, they say to speed up the game. But the interesting thing is, if you're on second base, they say technically you're in scoring range. And so now you're tempted, do you put someone up who can bunt, or someone maybe who is not a good bunter to try to advance the run to third? It's made for some interesting plays this year.
Yeah, I hadn't noticed.
Somehow this
Okay.
doesn't sound like you started without me.
No.
No,
Okay.
Hockey, baseball.
I noticed.
Baseball.
I got, at least I got the allusion to some sport.
Okay, we're going to finish session 3. And this session we're looking at distinguishing yourself as ruled from yourself as ruler. So we are ruled by people, but we also act as a ruler. So anyway, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, said our Lord, and to God the things that are God's. In fact, that just happened to be our text this past Sunday. And as I said, a lot of times we render to Caesar the things that are God's. So, but in the United States, who exactly is Caesar? And our study notes say, well, we don't have a Roman emperor, but we've got government at the federal, state, and local level. We got the legislative branch, the executive branch, the judicial branch. And so all of this, you can classify it as a Caesar in a sense. And we do submit to them, except should our government require us to do something that is sinful. Acts 5:29 says that we should obey God rather than men. Nevertheless, the government is still to be recognized because we as citizens are ruled by it. Now, everyone, or a lot of people will say, we live in a democracy. No, when you look at the Constitution, we are not a democracy, we are a republic.
But republic, that's kind of like a misnomer a little bit though,
Yes.
because it's a form of democracy.
Exactly, right, yes.
It's not a
Sure.
pure,
It's not a cut and dry.
yeah.
But essentially, in a democracy, the majority rules. In a republic, the individual, in a republic, the individual is protected from the majority.
Mhm.
That's kind of a, Ayn Rand.
Yeah, I mean, I know who the name.
Okay, anyway, she said the government was set to protect man from criminals. The Constitution was written to protect man from government,
Yes.
which is, yes. 1 second here.
Oh, Alice Shrugged, isn't that Ayn Rand?
Atlas Shrugged, yes. Yes.
I knew Ayn Rand was familiar.
Thomas Jefferson said this: a democracy is nothing more than mob rule,
Hmm.
where 51% of the people may take away the rights of the other 49.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
John Adams said this: democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself. There never was a democracy yet that did not commit suicide.
I think they usually end in civil war.
That's usually correct, yes. Sorry, I'll take a picture of my cats. People are probably wondering, isn't this supposed to be a Bible class?
That's okay. I've been off kind of going back and forth cleaning up dog urine too, because somebody had an accident too just before Bible study.
Oh,
I
okay.
know. So see, yours is at least nice. Mine is gross.
That's true. Boys, they're up on a cabinet fighting. Okay,
I like it better when they're behind you and I can see them.
yes. Boys. Okay. Yet in another sense, United States citizens are also rulers, not individually, but corporately. Ours is a constitutional republic in which those who hold public office are sworn to submit to governing authorities higher than themselves. So American citizens have the privilege of being a ruler as well as ruled. And so let's look at 1 Peter 2, 13 and 14.
Oh.
Can you read that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Submit yourselves for the Lord's sake to every authority instituted among men, whether to the king as the supreme authority, or to governors who are sent by him to punish those who do wrong and to commend those who do right. And verse 17. Show proper respect to everyone. Love the brotherhood of believers. Fear God and honor the king. Who should Christians, according to these verses here, who should Christians be subject to?
Well, in a way to the Lord, because you're submitting because for the Lord's sake.
Right, there you go. I like that. Submit yourself for the Lord's sake. So we should take our place in order under every human governing institution. Now, where does the governing authorities get their power from?
From
It's
the
always
Lord.
been my understanding God.
Yeah.
Okay. What did you say, John?
The Lord. Yeah. God.
Okay. How would someone who is not a believer answer that?
Well, it depends on what kind of government.
Yeah. Yeah. If it's a dictatorship and it's from just one individual.
Or military might.
We're military, yeah, then it's or if it's a republic, then they could say it's from the people.
if it's a king, I mean, actually in the days of the kings, that was considered, they were considered, I thought, given by God to the people, but that doesn't answer your question of non-believers.
Mhm.
Yeah. You're muted, Pastor.
Thank you. I think, no, John answered it, and that is people.
Yeah.
We obviously as Christians see that the governing authorities get their power from God, because all things are in subject to God. Now, Proverbs 24:21 says, "Fear the Lord and the king, my son, and do not join with the rebellious." What do you think Solomon is saying? Fear the Lord and the king. What does, Denise, what does the synodically approved Bible say?
In the notes,
No, read the first part of the verse.
my son, fear the Lord and the king, and do not join with those who do otherwise.
Okay, now what does the approved study note say?
It says, kings and rulers are servants of God and are therefore to be honored as such.
Okay, so now let's look at John 19:11. Jesus answered, "You would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin." Notice that Jesus said that the Roman governor Pilate handed power over, Jesus said that the Roman governor Pilate had power over him. And where was that power from? It was given from above. Governing officials are placed in office people in positions of power, government-wise, they're placed in power through us, through human beings. But yet their positions and their authority, well, if you're a believer, we would say, we will acknowledge that it comes from God. I guess we'll think about this. Even David. David respected Saul as king, even though he was, a murderer. He did not excuse the Saul's wrongs, but yet David still honored him. And I think we can make a leap to the president here. We may not like his actions. We may not like what he's doing, but we honor him because of the office that he holds. Just like if there's a different person in the office that may be a different political persuasion than what you hold, we still honor that person because of the position they hold, not necessarily the actions or the laws they have created or enacted. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, but it just seems like a lot of people today are not honoring. They're very, very violently opposed to the president, and
it's on a side note here, I'm wondering why this man is so hated. Well, I mean, it seems like from the very day of election that he won, is it the fact that this was not supposed to be his, it's supposed to be Hillary's? I mean, why is there so much?
Yeah. I think that probably has a lot to do with it.
I mean, you remember he was a Democrat at one time and they loved him.
Right.
But I'm sorry. It just, to me, there's a group in there right now who hates anything that gets between themselves and power. It doesn't matter who it would be. They would be hated and vilified. It's Trump because he's there. And he also took it from who they truly wanted to have elected. Just my opinion.
It seems
Well,
evolution of it's getting worse with each succeeding president. It just the and I'm trying not to be political here, but it does seem like the violence tends to be from the one side, although there certainly are violent people on both sides. Right at this time, one side seems to be more violent than the other. But it seems like many people have lost their sense of civility. And the things that we were talking about, recognizing the rulers and having respect for the rulers, whether it be a king or a constitutional republic like we have, if there are very many people in this country who do not believe that, they're like Jan said, they're not getting their way, so they're throwing a tantrum and they're getting very violent.
We lost our leader.
I know, but he's got a nice picture.
Yeah.
Is this my
I'm here.
There you are.
I thought for a minute I could go stir the spaghetti.
Well, go ahead.
Where did you go, Pastor? Or did you?
I had to get something to my wife, or ask my wife something.
You missed my rampage.
No, I heard it.
Oh, okay.
Today I went to visit someone, and I bumped into another person who said that they just bought a new handgun, but they could not get the bullets for it, the ammunition for it, because it's sold out. And I asked, well, what made you go out and get this? And he said, well, I had one before, but it was too much power for me, so I got a different one. But the way the world is going, you just don't know. And so I'm thinking, okay, I could take that many different ways. I am afraid of what's going to happen once or if someone loses the election. Or, actually both ways.
Yeah, I agree. There are violent people.
Okay, here's the question. As a Christian, how do I ask this? Let me backtrack. As a Christian, how can you justify your actions to God? I mean, if you're, I'm talking about.
If you're violent?
Yes.
Oh, how could I don't think you can.
But they do.
Well, yeah, but they're wrong.
But what is their argument?
Boy, that's a good question, because you know what, it's very clear from the Bible and what we've been reading that we need to respect the government and those that have been put in power above us in the government. And it's like, well, if it doesn't happen the way I want, then I have a right to be violent, and that's just plain wrong. People have lost their sense of civility.
If you are only being violent because you're mad about who won or lost, I don't think there's much of an excuse.
No,
But then again, we justify fighting in wars. I mean, we don't consider our soldiers to be against God as they serve in the army and whatnot. I think sometimes, I mean, Jesus let horrific things be done to him, violent things be done to him, so that for our better good. I think sometimes people have to fight. If you see someone being hurt and you don't step in to help, were you any less culpable for them being hurt than if you had stepped in? And then, I mean, you're kind of like, if you do step in and are violent and help someone, do you have to justify that to God? Not that you wanted to have to be put in the position, but you were. So, I mean, I don't know if that's a real easy question. How do you, I have trouble with the words, how do you justify it to God? If you are trying to justify something to God, to me, you're trying to argue with him about what's right and wrong.
Yeah, you're right.
Right there, you have gotten something wrong. If you are doing something in aid of another individual, because you feel God doesn't, not enjoy, this, whatever is happening, I think there's a different standard there. And I don't know about how justification comes into it, because I think you'd think God was on your side.
Well, there's a big difference between going to war because your government has declared war on another country and violently causing a riot in the streets. Those are very, very different
things.
Well, and you need to look at is it a righteous war? Is it a righteous purpose? That's kind of the key of it.
Yes.
I know people who've been arrested because they maybe weren't violently protesting abortion, but they did things that got them arrested for, protesting abortion. I don't think they thought they had to justify their actions with God, because I think they thought he was with them.
Yeah.
Even though that's something our government says that's okay.
Do you think that part of this can be a 9th and 10th commandment issue? Now you're going to ask me, what's that?
Well, sometimes they get a little blurred between this, I mean, I know all the commandments, but sometimes the numbers get a little blurred.
Well, 9th and 10th deal with coveting.
Coveting, yeah.
Now, I see this as people wanting something that does not belong to them. And what is that something? It's power, it's control.
Power, control, or things, the writers who loot and,
That's
true.
Here's a question. How specifically can Christians show themselves to be subject to governing authorities? For instance, what about a bumper sticker? that are rude and insulting toward government and its officials.
Well, that's a hard one because I take pleasure in some of those. I mean, I don't put them on my car, but I still laugh at them. Sometimes from
So-
either side, but
Well, in this country,
So-
we have the right to say bad things about our government.
Right.
We have that right. And of course, you know, I as I told my kids, and just because you have the legal right to do something doesn't mean it's right or
Right.
right thing to do or it's the smart thing to do. I mean, there's God's laws and then there's people's law. And they're not always the same. And one must be careful.
maybe I don't know if this is a good example of what you're talking about, but okay, like is in government, you can have, like Trump is president right now, you can put Biden Harris for president in your yard. I don't find that disrespecting the president. However, I was listening to something today and somebody put a Trump sign in and they said, and the person who was talking about it said their neighbor put 3 anti-Trump signs in their thing, but all of them had to do with they were personal attacks. Not on policy, personal attacks. And whether right or wrong, it was just name calling and whatever. So I think if you want to be against the government, you should watch your language and argue points and don't make it personal.
Well, and we can respectfully disagree.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, I think
Well,
so.
back to that bumper sticker, you know, it should be to display such a sign is not honoring that government position. So, I mean, you look at 1 Peter here, verse 17, show proper respect to everyone.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
But it says proper respect. It doesn't
Oh, well.
show respect to everyone. It says show proper respect to everyone.
okay,
So in other words, if someone's out there lying and cheating and stealing, I don't think I have to show respect for their lying and cheating and stealing. I can show respect for them as an individual by not unduly like hurting them for just being a person. I still might put them in jail for their lying, stealing, and whatever, but I don't have to treat them inhumanely just because I put them in prison or whatever for whatever they did.
so how would we show proper respect to governing officials?
Following the rules. I
Yeah.
am a rule follower. I like rules. They tell you the proper way to do things. And the lying, cheating, robbing, those kinds of things, there are laws of the land to follow to take care of that. Looting is not one of those.
True.
Well, and neither are some of the shenanigans. But I think we have a problem today, too, though, in our own government, is that we keep electing people that we don't trust. We don't, even though they show themselves to be liars or maybe even cheaters or trying to not do what's best for the country, but for themselves, we still keep re-electing them into their positions. So, I mean, so in other words, it's kind of our fault, but Congress has gotten to be such a do nothing, they won't stand up for anything for fear that they won't get elected. Personally, I think that's why they get made fun of. But that's just because they're not doing their job. We still have respect for what their job is supposed to be, but sometimes we get very irritated and maybe make fun of them when we see that they care more for something other than what they're supposed to be caring about. And that goes both sides of the aisle. I'm not trying to just say one or the other, but I mean, when was the last time we got through elections and got people that Americans could stand behind, or did we just listen to partisan politics in our own like party and elect the person we thought that we could get elected in our party and then throw them out there whether they were good or not?
I heard today someone said that one of the things that contributed to our state of the world today is the internet, is the evolution of 24-hour news. That you did not have that. I mean, and smartphones, that as soon as you see something, you take out your camera, and next you know it's being filmed around the world.
Yeah, but how is that bad?
Well, see, exactly.
How do you use it?
Right, there you go. It's technology.
Yeah, it's just,
And technology can be good, and it can be used in a bad sense.
I mean, what is the new scandal right now that Google has hired Chinese nationalists to write their algorithms for who gets to say what, and it tends to censor stuff bad out about China and you know, certain things. So the internet doesn't necessarily present an even-handed. We've let people. There's a lot of power in the internet by people who are running it that they weren't even elected. And I don't think we have to show proper respect for their authority because, well, they just took it.
So is this the Jan News Network?
No, that's the news I was listening to today.
So
yeah,
is
that's
John,
big issue right on the news is exactly what we're saying, Jan,
Oh, I know. I just heard it tonight. I mean, that's.
for a lot longer than tonight.
Oh, well, it's been going on for a lot longer than that. It's just tonight they had proof of it.
Yeah, and they're the CEOs of those companies are being called in front of Congress.
Yeah.
They're going to have to answer to their actions.
Yeah.
well, getting back to as Jan was saying, technology, take a look, or the story of the Tower of Babel.
Yeah.
That in a way is a sense, I would say, using technology. In other words, just think of how we were able to construct that. Obviously, that's a wrong way to use technology.
Yeah, obviously the motives of the builders of the tower were wrong, and God confused them, and it put a stop to it. And you could argue that the good Lord might do the same thing for something that some high tech thing that has the same effect.
It took us 38 minutes before the word motive was used.
You were timing, you were looking for the word motive?
I was looking for the word motive. Because in all politics.
Well, who said it? Is that you, Pastor? Who said? What? How did it come up when we were talking about the motive? Oh, the motives.
You said it. Yeah.
Oh.
It's okay. Well, motive's not a bad word, and people have them.
Well, I stumbled on it. I certainly don't deserve any glory there.
Well, I'm glad you said it, because I mean, when you look at those who rule today and those who are ruled, you wonder why they do things. And the question underneath it all is, what's their motive? What's prompting them to act? What's prompting them to react?
Well, and then you have to ask,
is that money?
Why would somebody vote for somebody like that? So I think there's motives that run both ways.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the motive to destroy people who are who are, I mean, by worldly standards, relatively good people. I mean, they're not destroying them because they're just, I mean, they're not destroying them because they're people are who they are. They're people that have gotten in their way. And I mean, that's just for the power and the
Yeah,
control.
it's a quest for power.
Yeah.
Those that would elect those people want something from. So, you know, I mean, clearly somebody who wants a lot of power can get that by offering money, situations, you know, whatever to them.
I mean, that even goes into our businesses.
Sure.
Especially as we go, you know, around globally and stuff like that. Why, I mean, people do business in countries that have absolutely horrid human rights things, but they don't say anything about those human rights because they're too busy making money off of that country.
Sure.
So at what point should our Christian values and beliefs come into play in politics?
How can you separate
Well,
them?
Okay.
Yeah. A lot.
Well, okay, that's a good, okay.
Amy Coney Barrett can separate it by saying, I have to rule on the laws that are made, not the laws that I like. But as an individual, how can I separate how I deal in politics? Because how can I separate it with how I have my allegiance to God? I mean,
but there are a lot of people who, for instance, the whole thing of abortion. Clearly, we know how God stands. It's black and white.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not even a gray issue.
For
But
us,
yet, what?
for us,
Christians.
believers, there's no gray.
Right. Well, I would say even for some people who are believers.
Yeah.
But there we're going to go into that. They have justified their beliefs to God. I don't know that they have actually got the godly ones down there. They're trying to justify their beliefs.
Well, is there such a thing as a Christian who believes in abortion?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess I have a problem with that. And is it a matter of interpretation of the scriptures or what?
I think they've been led astray.
Yeah.
It is, we have people that we know and love that they can talk their way around and get to the gray issue of abortion. And I said, I can't even find a gray issue. It's black and it's white.
Well, I think don't they usually go into it? Well, I would never have an abortion myself, but I don't have the right to choose for someone else. Isn't that what that is to me what the justification to God is?
Or you maybe can approach another way by saying the unborn baby is not human. It's not a person yet.
Thank you. And that's where I was going to go. In bioethics, the topic is, at what point does someone become a person? And science has made that clear when an egg and sperm get together, and you now have a human being. But to some, personhood is defined as birth plus one breath. Now you're a person.
Or pastor, even further, since a newborn is not very well known by the parents, they still might not consider it worthy of keeping.
Right.
I mean, it's almost like the only way that a person can achieve human status is if they were emotionally attached, if somebody has an emotional attachment to you. And that's just so wrong. In my opinion, that is so wrong.
What I have a hard time with is there are a lot of couples throughout the world who are just dying to adopt a baby.
Oh yeah.
And so why is that not an option for some, you know what I mean? It seems like we have to take it.
Why is it not an option? Because the sin of your own comfort,
Yes.
the
That's
sin
a
of your own comfort trumps actually going through the stigma or
Okay.
whatever of being pregnant without a father or whatever, and then also going through all the pain and whatnot of childbirth just to
Okay.
give it up.
Well, it's a woman. They say a woman's right to choose.
I always say, where does the baby get to choose?
Well, they don't have any say in it.
I know, that's my problem.
Yeah, I
Please.
go around the internet the other day. It said something about that Ginsburg was a champion to those that weren't heard. You know, the little guy that wasn't heard. Well, what about all of the unheard people that are aborted every year? I mean, there's a huge, yeah.
Denise, looked like you were going to say something.
Well, when you had talked about adoption, I had seen something the other day that said, wouldn't it be wonderful if our government funded adoption instead of funded abortions?
Abortion.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because adoption is really horrendously expensive.
Right. And wouldn't that be a win-win?
Yes.
I just some of these things I listen to, there are groups that have been having a lot of success in bringing the abortion rate down by working with unwed mothers and, you know, giving them support during their pregnancy all the way through where they give up their babies to adoption. And they actually have seen a lot of success with those types of programs. And even science is getting more and more into that. I'm proving that the baby inside the womb, I mean, they've actually proven some of human characteristics for those things too. So when I love it when people always tell me the science is clear, and I always want to go, huh, whose science?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now we do have to see our fault in some of the stigma, meaning that as a Christian, if we know someone is pregnant who is not married, what tends to happen, or what can tend to happen?
Well, I don't even know if it's the stigma so much today as the financial burdens.
Yeah.
Well, I
yeah.
was going from the point that, okay, if I'm a Christian and I look across the street and I see someone who is pregnant and I know they're not married, I may be very quick to judge.
That's, yeah.
Sure.
And I think some of that then has contributed. Have we as Christians always put our best foot forward?
No. And I think that's probably part of the problem in the church today is that for several years, or decades even, we've kind of skated, and we've actually fallen into that trap that the government will do it and they have more money to do it better, to feed the poor, to hospitalize, to take care of the hospitals. And it's getting too complicated for churches to have hospitals and different things because there's too many government regulations. And so we've kind of abdicated our responsibilities, I think, in many ways.
Yes.
We throw money at it instead.
Yeah, I've heard liberals say, well, if the government doesn't do it, who will do it?
Who did it before the government? It was the church.
Yeah, and so yeah, they've got a point that we Christians maybe have let it get too far away from us.
We've abdicated our responsibility to the supreme all-being God, which is known as government.
Yes.
We rendered unto to Caesar what wasn't Caesar's.
That which should be God's.
Yeah. Yes.
And I don't know why I didn't think about that Sunday, but no, that is it's someone else's problem to take care of.
And sometimes, I mean, in individuals' defense, sometimes it is, you don't live next to the lady who got pregnant, or next to or next to the person who's suffering with food issues or whatever, because we tend to live in our little world conclaves. I think that's why some people were saying that maybe if Christians wanted to get back into the game, what they should do is partner with churches who are in less economic, their economics aren't as good as others, and then see where they can aid and help. So, I mean, part of it is you just don't see it, but I do believe we have abdicated what we're supposed to be doing.
Yes. For sure.
Let's see here. Over the last couple of centuries, God's natural law has been overshadowed by the sovereignty of nations. In other words, the idea that a nation can make its laws anything it wants them to be has grown in currency during this time. And that's certainly true. In a nation that is a republic, this premise can lead to the conclusion that the people are sovereign over their laws. Now, interesting, Cicero already knew better when he indicated that no one can make robbery, adultery, or falsifying wills just and right simply by getting enough people to vote for such things. And if you think about it, next paragraph or next sentence says, an American president, Calvin Coolidge, aptly commented that people do not make laws. What they do is to discover laws. The majority in the electorate, even the totality of the electorate, remains accountable to God, whether these people acknowledge it or not.
Whether these people acknowledge it or not. That's big.
Yes. So whether you are a ruler or someone in government, or we are the one who's being ruled, we all have a responsibility to God. And I think, remember the very first lesson, who are you voting for? Whom are you voting for? Someone who fills out their ballot, are we voting for what's going to improve my life or make me better, or what's going to be best for the country as a whole? And then I'm sure Jan's thinking, well, who's going to determine what's best for the whole?
No, actually, what I was thinking is I did that because but it's worldly reasons, because I see both sides as having problems, but to me, I see one side that has become so egregious in what they're doing that it made voting I mean, usually I have a lot of trouble with voting, deciding who's best or whatever. But what has happened over the last several, like, I don't know, 12 years or so, it's made it easier and easier for me to vote because I just see people taking away religious liberty and taking away people's God-given rights, even just to survive. That it, yeah, well, but you see, someone could argue I'm still just doing, is that real? You can get into that whole thing. It's kind of like, is there any really altruistic action? Because to be altruistic, you have to get nothing from it. And usually when you do something nice, you get something from it, even if it's just a good feeling. So, I mean, it's the same thing there. Are you really truly doing it for that, or just because you've decided that's the way the world should be? But you can only do the best you can.
I think at times we should be like Australia, and that is you get 30 days to campaign. And I think it's Australia. We're getting feedback. Yeah, I think it's Australia. You got 30 days before the
It's you. Your own voice is feeding back at you.
it's me.
Yeah, it's just repeating what you're saying. So, I mean, if you just keep talking and don't listen to it, you'll be fine because we'll be able to figure it out.
Okay, I think we should be like Australia in that you're not allowed to campaign for your office anything more than 30 days out. And so I think that would be great here.
It's also in Australia that if you don't vote, you're fined.
Yes, yep. I pointed that out too. So so someone who, well, one of the questions is, list the personal qualities you need as a Christian who is a ruling citizen. What qualities do you look for in a candidate who is going to be representing you?
I've never found them in the candidates that they give me.
Well, and I was just thinking that in all leadership positions, all leadership should have a servant's heart. And I think that whether it's politicians, whether it's the leaders of your family, and we aren't seeing that.
Yeah.
Even though someone serves and is willing to give up their paycheck, that's still not a servant heart.
Not necessarily.
Well, it depends on why you're doing it, but I think you were talking in general, weren't you, Denise?
Yeah, in general, and the, for serving your fellow
person, man.
Yeah. Instead of self-serving, and so much is just self-service.
Well, I think that's what I pointed out even with our Congress right now. They don't want to take a stand on anything, or at least put into policy anything. That's why Congress has been at a standstill forever, because nobody wants to have it thrown up at them at their next election that they did this.
Right.
I sit there and I go, okay, if I'm going to stand up for something and people don't like it, I'm going to hope they stand up and say, she did that, because I'll say, you bet I did, because it was the right thing to do. But that's not what we get in politics.
Christians consider religious liberty important? Why?
Why?
Yeah, it's like, why not?
Well, really obvious. But yeah, I
Okay, well, let me ask this then. How should we use our religious freedom then?
oh, well, we need to practice. We need to practice our religion to show our religious freedom.
Okay, so it's hard to use our religious freedoms if,
If we didn't have any,
well, yes, but
When our hands get tied.
Okay, let's put it this way. What about all those Christians who got torn apart in arenas for the enjoyment of the Roman populace? They were executed. They were exercising their religious freedom, and they paid
yep.
they paid for it with their lives. Now, I don't particularly want to live in a country where that's how I get to exercise my religious freedoms. I would like to be free to do them without getting torn apart in the lion's den. And I think it's important, although you will find in countries where there is more persecution, people have a little bit stronger religious oomph in their personal religions. So, I mean, it does make you a bit soft maybe too.
Well, look at countries where Christianity is flourishing and growing. You're going to find it in countries where they're under persecution.
Yeah.
true.
And there's a lot at stake. Like,
But I want to
death.
wish persecution on Christians in order for it to grow. That sounds a little counterproductive. But it is true in times of persecution that Christianity does grow.
That's because we can no longer put ourselves out there as God. When we're going through persecutions, it's taken out of our control, and all we have to look to is God. And I think that's one of the sad things about being in a bountiful nation is you tend to think you did it rather than God did it. And then you get lazy in your Christianity or your faith. Okay, my soapbox, I'm sorry, I'll get off.
Nope, that's okay. We're done. We're ending there. Tomorrow